Today, it is all about the Australian Bruch Cherry, a fantastic screening hedge. I'm gonna tell you the good, the bad, and everything in between. And for you folks that might be in a zone that's a little too chilly for this tree, I'm gonna share a couple treats with you at the end. So let's go. Everybody loves some privacy, especially here in Southern California, where everyone is a movie star, rock star, or at least pretending to be. And that's what makes screening trees so popular. Now, before we jump into the Australian Bruch Cherry, I do want to clarify something a bit. There is a difference between screening trees and screening trees that make good hedges. Hedges are essentially screening trees that take well to pruning in such a way that it looks neat and uniform. And while there are lots of fantastic screening trees to choose from, there may be only a handful that make a good hedge. And of course, selection depends on what USDA zone you're in. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's take a look at Eugenia Myrtifolia, commonly known as Australian Bruch Cherry. This is a tall, slender, upright tree that can take to shearing very well because of the tight, dense foliage, with the leaves being fairly small in size. Now, the leaves being smaller in size is often a key attribute of a tree or shrub making a good hedge. Generally, the smaller the leaf, the cleaner the hedge appears, because the trees with smaller leaves hide chop marks and scarring from shearing much better. And that is one reason why Eugenia is often one of my go-to hedges. Now, outside that, it's got some really fantastic attributes. Aesthetically, it's got a really attractive medium green ovate leaf, with the new growth kind of being a reddish bronze tone. And it's also very drought tolerant once established and can take some seacoast conditions. It can get up to about 35 to 40 feet tall, but most are seen kept significantly lower. General hedge height maybe from about 6 to 10 feet, somewhere in there. But if you really want that height, it can get up taller. And you're gonna wanna plant it in full sun to light shade. Now, I also enjoy the little red berry that the Eugenia produces. They have a really nice contrast to the leaves, and yes, they are edible. They are not the most delicious berries in the world. They're a little bit chalky, but you can eat them if you really wanted to. So that could be a nice added bonus for you. Now, what I will also caution you about in regards to the berry is the dropping. If the Eugenia is planted over a dirt area or a mulch area, you generally don't have to worry about the berry drop too much. But if it's in close proximity to, let's say, a walkway, a driveway, some kind of hardscape, then it could have the potential to become a little bit of a problem. And if it gets crushed in that hardscape, it could potentially stain. So you just want to be a little bit cautious about where you're planting it. Now, with that said, if it's sheared regularly, oftentimes when you're shearing it, you're cutting off those berries and it becomes much less of a problem. Now, beyond its aesthetic value, again, it is very drought tolerant, and that's fantastic, especially here in Southern California, where water is always an issue. And that is true for so many other regions of the US. And another plus, it adapts pretty well to various soil types. It's not gonna be super finicky like some other plants will. Now, you can use Eugenia as a single specimen tree. It will get fairly tall, up to about 40 feet or so. But where this tree really shines is creating that dense, solid wall of privacy. Residentially speaking, it's frequently used to kind of wrap around a property line and really create that defined space. And even if you have a second-story house, yes, it can get tall enough to provide some screening for second-story windows. And if you have some unsightly views from the neighbors next door and you want to make that disappear, this tree will do the trick. Now, a question I get a lot is, what is a good screening hedge for a small, narrow planter space? And Eugenia is often my #1 go-to plant for that particular application. Generally, the root systems can thrive in very narrow spaces, and they do pretty well. This root system of the Eugenia is nowhere near invasive as some other trees like ficus that is notorious for tearing up sidewalks and driveways and getting into pipes, drain lines, and all that stuff. Eugenia generally does not do that, so this is a much safer play for those narrow spaces. Now, a design tip I want to throw out at you for hedges in general is to create layers in your planting. Your hedge is sort of your backdrop to the landscape. And when you just have a wall of green, it's so much nicer if you have multiple layers of plants in front of it. If you guys have seen any of my other videos, you know I'm always talking about plant layering and creating interest with height, color, and texture variation. Those three design elements really make a garden stand out and be unique. I'm not really a fan of wall-to-wall lawn. Don't be afraid to create nice, deep planter spaces where you can get those plant layers. Now I'm also gonna throw this out at you guys, and I realize it's not gonna be everyone's cup of tea, but Eugenias can make really good topiaries. They make great topiaries because they have those small leaves and the young saplings can be trained very easily. And this is typically done with some kind of wire framing. And as the plant matures, you use the wire frame as your pruning guide. Now, I've seen some pretty wild topiaries that I don't know that I'd want in my front yard, but you know, they have their time and place. Giraffes and bears and hearts and, you know, all sorts of different shapes. Okay, it's artistic, but where I'm gonna use topiaries are in more of a formal design setting where you may need to flank an entry with a conical shaped topiary, or maybe a globe or sphere topiary. Those are great uses of topiaries in those formal landscape settings. So with that all said, yes, Eugenia is awesome, but it does have some downsides. One of the biggest downsides to Eugenia is that it frequently gets Eugenia psyllid. And these psyllids will literally suck the life right out of the leaves, and it causes them to curl up and get just kind of a bubbly look, and it's really not attractive. Usually, it does not kill the plant. It just doesn't look too fantastic. And usually if the infestation's not too bad, you can treat it with neem oil. It is a very common occurrence. It's almost guaranteed at some point in time the psyllid will attack your Eugenia hedge. And some folks just let it be and are totally fine with a few bubbly leaves. Me personally, it doesn't bother me too much, but some people kind of freak out about it. Now, with all that said, I think Eugenia is a fantastic choice for a hedge. There are some other options out there. I did a video on it. I'm gonna put that right up at the top there. So feel free to click on that and check out those other options. So this is all fine and dandy if you're in zones 9 through 11. But what about those folks that are in those lower zones where the winters get a little bit chillier? I do have a decent option for you, and that would be Prunus Caroliniana, commonly known as Carolina cherry. This tree is hardy down to zone 7. It has a pretty similar growth habit and actually does provide some really nice screening, like the Eugenia. It's also super drought tolerant once it's established. Just don't try to eat the berries on that because they do contain some toxins. While it's not a perfect substitute, it does have some really great attributes. Now for you folks below zone 7, there are also some good options. I've seen curl-leaf mountain mahogany used as a hedge, and even though it takes on more of a natural form, it can still stay fairly uniform if it's pruned regularly. I am gonna put a couple more options down in the description below, so feel free to check those out. And that just about wraps us up for the Australian brush cherry. Thank you so much, you guys, for hanging out with me on yet another video. I appreciate it. If you have any questions on anything, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Share, like, subscribe, do all that fun YouTube stuff. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you on the next video, and happy planting.